Thank you so much for being on time, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of the All Things Talent webinar series by Naukri Hiring Suite. Naukri Hiring Suite offers a bouquet of new age solutions from brands like Naukri.com, IamJobs.com, Hirist, First Naukri, eHire, and RMS for all your recruitment needs. My name is Prashant Sharma, and I'm super happy to be here and as a member of the Naukri Hiring Suite marketing team. Right? And I can't stress this enough, right on time. So that's something I'm really happy about as well, right? We sincerely hope you're staying safe and taking all the necessary precautions in these pandemic times. And I understand that everything has gotten better, but we still have to take all our necessary precautions, right? The aim of this All Things Talent webinar series is to bring together the HR fraternity and promote an environment of mutual growth and inspire HR professionals to develop as leaders by learning from experienced leaders and stalwarts, industry stalwarts, right? It's a pleasure to have two esteemed panelists from the HR world today. But today I bring them in and discuss the topic. The topic for today is one with great relevance. I think with how we're trying to hire more people, do such great things. I think one important thing is taking care of our important folks, right? Taking care of our top talent and retaining them by cultivating a performance of a culture of high performance throughout the organization. Our two senior leaders today who graciously accepted our invitation are as follows. Ms. Ekta Singh, she's the CHRO at AGS Health. In her role, she manages the gamut of HR, CSR, D&I, branding and communications. More than two and a half decades in talent delivery, benefits, complement, staffing, recruitment, and the list goes on. Since 1996, she's worked with organizations like CMC Limited, Corpus, Deloitte, Royal Bank of Scotland, and Capgemini. She wears many hats, but she's also incredibly hilarious when she's in the mood. So I'm going to poke her, and I'm going to get her to sort of share those things as well with you, right? So you can expect some great wit from her. Also, a dear friend of mine, Pradnya Kulkarni, she's the regional head for talent and learning at Western Union. She's much like Ekta has been associated with the All Things Talent Forum for a really long time now. She too has more than two decades of experience across across various aspects in the organizations and verticals, whether it's organizational change, cultural transformation, leadership, talent management. She particularly revels in the the DEI agenda. She's authored articles and participated in NASSCOM events. She's someone who mentors, early stage women through voluntary organizations as well. And apart from that, I know for a fact that she's always got great best practices to talk about. Because I've been at her, at a physical event where she's absolutely ruled the audience. So I know she's gonna sort of do that for all of you again. The audience numbers already crossed 150. So thank you so much to everyone for being on time once again, right? Before I get started with everything, what I'm just quickly gonna do is to sort of ask both our panelists, one personal positive and one professional positive. And I'll start with Ekta first. When I say personal, professional positive post-pandemic, I mean, I understand it's been a tough time, but we're going to try to put a positive spin on it, right? So Ekta, over to you first. One personal positive and one professional positive that has come your way via the pandemic.
All right. Thank you, Prashant. Firstly, I must mention that you call Pradnya a dear friend and not me. I'm pretty envious of that, huh, Pradnya? So, coming to the question, professional and personal positive. So professional positive, I think for me is I realized I have quite a bit of time now that I don't travel because of the pandemic. I stay home. Earlier, I used to travel 3 weeks in a month. So I use that time now to do a lot of the reading that I used to miss out. I also binge watch a lot of documentaries and TV series. So that's a positive for me. On the personal side, I made a discovery. I made a discovery that I am a good mother. I used to think, I'm just a weekend mom and a weekend wife. But I realized that I'm actually a very good mother who has a lot of patience, mind you. I always thought I had no patience. So that's my personal and professional, realization of COVID.
Fantastic. Pradnya, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, I know, no pressure, right? You've already said Ekta has a funny bone. My God, matching up to her skills is going to be really tough. And thank you for calling me a dear friend. Um, I think I'm happy we've started off on a positive note because I know this whole pandemic many people have been struggling in this space, especially the second wave, right? But surprisingly for me, there have really been great learning experience on a personal side. While my girls and husband learned some very exotic skills of cleaning utensils, cooking, learning to mop and sweep, and just understand the logic on when you sweep, you go forward, you mop, you come backward, and all those things. I spent time on some of the mundane stuff like learning a new German language. I spent time gardening. And I, in the last year or so, have managed to have a produce of, say, 100 papayas, about 50 odd pomegranates, beautiful, beautiful trees, really big sapota and those kind of stuff, and fresh produce of vegetables. And I absolutely love the fact that I'm able to do all of this on my terrace. I even managed to bring some wonderful exotic birds to my balcony, and one of the couples gave birth to a beautiful set of babies as well. So I just enjoyed this whole space of last year and a half, and just being in my balcony, working out from there, and as well as watching these wonderful things I had missed out in the last so many years. So I think that's for me a personal positive. On the professional front, though, I actually mastered the art of saying no without being apologetic. I always struggled, and of course, it's a lot to do with the fact that people were so much more tolerant and respectful and empathetic towards your work life balance and stuff. So, but what I learned was I could politely refuse to join some of the really late night calls or early morning calls. And I felt that I'm comfortable doing that, which I wasn't before. So I think for me, it has been a great learning experience, both personal and professional.
Wow, I think two wonderfully different and equally important aspects of what one could have utilized this phase as. And I mean that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a positive spin on it, but we know it's been a tough time, right? And moving on to the topic for the day, I think it's a topic that is extremely important because whether it was pandemic or non-pandemic, this is a problem or this is a pain point for most HR professionals, right? How do we retain our top talent? How do we ensure that they are taken care of, right? Uh, so I think the time is right to involve the audience. We've got more than 175 here. So let's do our first poll. I think the first poll will be coming up on your screen shortly. Uh, the yes, so it's a pretty simple question. Is retaining your top talent a challenge? Yes, no, maybe. It's a simple enough. I just wanted to understand if we've done a good deed by selecting this as the topic, because let's see what the answer is, right? Because we want to be able to empathize with you. Right. I think it's a simple enough question, so we can see the results now. I think we can move on. Right. Let's see. Wow. So 87% of you are saying it is a challenge, right? And there's 5% of you who are saying no, and I'd love to take notes from the 5% of you guys. I mean, if it's not a challenge, then you guys are obviously doing something really really well. So we will come to take suggestions from you as well. But yeah, I mean, so that's where we are in terms of organization. So 87% felt that it is a challenge, right? Uh, and that brings me to my first question and the first aspect of this. Uh, and I'll put this to both, and I'll start with Pradnya first. Uh, how to identify current and future, high performance employees and workers in a judicious manner. And when I say how do we do this? How do we identify? I'd love it if you could also talk about certain metrics or certain aspects that could be, of course, devoted to, and they'll vary from team to team, but holistically, what role do we play in it, right?
Mm. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. And I think the key aspect is really to ensure you're able to differentiate performance from potential. In many cases, you see managers kind of mixing up the two, missing the wood for the trees, if you will. Needless to say that potential can't be a substitute for performance. It's just only when the two of them tango really well together do we have something to build on. Of course, having said this, I just feel you need to be able to spot the difference between these two. And therefore, really, the talent management function exists. And thank God for that. People like us have jobs. So I'm happy about that. Of course, some organizations, they pay more of a lip service and some of the others really stay true to their sense of the word. But let's take a moment to understand, what do you mean by a hypo and how do you really spot one? And in my world, in my definition, I think most of the times you'll be able to spot these characters in some cases. They hide in plain sight. And if you have someone on your team who gets it at the first instance, who kind of grasps the why a little more intuitively than others, who reads between the lines and still can draw some color within those lines, who's not afraid to stick his or her neck out and say, take some well-warranted risks. And lastly, who demonstrates a strong execution excellence, then I would say this is a hallmark of a high potential. So at an organization level, a few things that I have seen in my experience, we are currently also following at Western Union, and what I have heard and read from my colleagues as well, I would call out these 2 or 3 things real quick. First is to really understand that performance and potential as the 2 key attributes, and see where are you leaning towards as you are assessing the talent. Yeah, where are your biases in that? And you know that performance is more about the behaviors that you're demonstrating while you're contributing, but potential is really about the ability, the aspirations, the engagement, a combination of these things, right? The second thing I would strongly suggest organizations to look at as well, when you say judiciously especially, is just the leadership attributes that you're looking for. The values, are they really being demonstrated by the employee? The strategic vision of your organization, is that aligned to where you want the kind of talent to land? And is your performance philosophy really helping differentiate your high potentials? Yeah. And to really aid this process, I would like to remind managers and leaders of just one key thing is, while you may be hiring talent, the talent is an organizational asset. And so when you are assessing them, look, more enterprise-wide, and the potential for that person to move around. That would then make sense for the organization as a whole to invest in that talent, right? Biases creep in. We are all aware of this. We all have attended workshops around this, but we don't really act upon it. And one of the strong things that can impede the whole process of judiciously managing and assessing your talent is to be aware of your biases. And one classic example that I remember having read as well is a cognitive bias in which most people value what they have created and others have helped create them. I think it's called the IKEA bias, if I recollect it well. And they only look at the space where my team is helping me create something. And then I have an affinity to that talent. So these things definitely impede. A calibration across business leaders absolutely helps. So I think just being a little more conscious about the whole process, aligning it to your business strategies and taking care of those biases and calibration, that could really help assess your current and future talent.
Fantastic. I mean, so what you're talking about is a standard process you can use across the organization and try to measure those people, right? Fantastic. I think so. Ekta, what would you like to add on the same? I mean, in terms of identifying and understanding, who are these high performance operatives? Who are these folks?
Okay, so I think, Pradya, that's a fantastic way of explaining. To me, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I have to identify a top potential is who is raising their hand for a project without being asked, who is dying to have or has the hunger to do something beyond their work. To me, these would be the 2 call outs mostly. Someone who has a drive to learn, someone who always wants to do something different from what they're doing. Added on, not just supplement, added on, most importantly. There are some people who will say they want to do different things, but they will miss the bare minimum that is their own job. So that's not how you identify the top 3 aspects. Someone who has a hunger, someone who wants to do more, someone who is raising their hand. To me, those are aspects that I would look at when I talk about a high performing professional. How do I identify? There, of course, structure, as Pradnya also mentioned, there are many tools which organizations use. You could very well go about doing it, clearly differentiating between potential is someone who is, in my view, operating at the next level. So if there is a certain role and if an individual is operating at the next role, I think that's the person I would identify as a potential. While performance is you're giving somebody, let's say cricket analogy, India, cricket is the religion, right? 6 balls in an over, all 6 balls being out of the boundary and all 4 being, all being 4 runs, then yes, that is performance, or 6 being a mix, that's performance. That's not potential. Potential is when there is probably, well, I'm not a cricket fanatic, but let me try. What if you had a no ball, right? And on that no ball, somebody is able to actually hit a boundary or a 6, then that's a potential. That's the way I would probably differentiate the two and share with you, Prashant.
Fantastic. And I think because that's a refreshing take, it also helps me go into my second question to you. And Ekta, I'm going to ask you this again. Once you've done the initial bit, but once you've cracked that, okay, these are the folks who through whatever you've shared are the right people, right? Now, how do you communicate it to them in a manner that doesn't elevate them to a point where they feel as though or it doesn't lead to any kind of arrogance or ego? How do you handle that, and how do you ensure it's done tastefully so that they know that they are the chosen ones? So how do you communicate to them that they're the chosen ones?
True, Prashant. This is a very interesting question, I must confess. And many of my HR colleagues have in the past, we kind of talk, and most of you attending the call today are HR professionals, so you all know this. We refer to God's gift as mankind, right? We don't want them to become God's gift to mankind. Yes, definitely high potential, but the question always should be high potential for how long? Because each person can have a potential for a certain number of years, whether it is a role plus, probably a role plus, that's about it. So the life that we're talking of a high potential is 3, 4, max to max 5, not beyond that, unless that individual is reinventing themselves constantly, right? So that is very critical before I respond to how do you communicate. How do you communicate? I would say in my experience, I have maintained complete transparency whenever I've had a conversation. I have let the individual know that they are high potential. I have given the reasons why I believe they are, and what do they most importantly need to do to continue and sustain in being a high potential. And what are the pitfalls for them to watch out, to your point, not in going into the arrogance point of view, but staying within that radar, I think is very important. And that is where I believe the transparency of communication is critical. Also, what's critical is to balance the conversation, not to go overboard and not to make them believe that, yes, you are, the absolute chosen ones, and without you, the organization will not run. I think you have to be very careful. That's a balancing act is what I call it.
Great. I think so. That sort of captures the. Would you like to add anything, Pradnya?
No, so very well articulated. I was exactly looking at the last point that she mentioned, that no individual is bigger than the organization. And so we just want to be careful about, it's wonderful that there's transparency and people know where they stand, but we need to be cognizant about that they don't become bigger than the organization. So Ekta's really articulated that well.
Great. I love it when the panelists completely agree like that. right. I think now we've got close to 200 people on this on this webinar. So let's do one thing. Let's do another poll, because I think the next poll will help me transition towards the questions that are coming up as well. Right. I think the next poll will be up on your screen very shortly. Let's see. Yes. Right. So what's the most crucial factor when trying to retain top talent? Is it salary benchmarking or hikes? I mean, we all are aware of resign and renegotiate, the R&R that is very famous, right? Is it about the role, career path? Are those conversations the difficult ones to have? Access to companies' vision and future. A lot of people are actually very interested in the fact that, are they reporting to the absolute senior person? What's the impact they're making to the bottom line? Or, I mean, you can't say it, as of now, because it's been a combination of a few things. So what, according to you, is the most crucial factor for trying to retain top talent, right? The options are in front of you. I think now we can see the results. Right. So the first two options, so salary benchmarking and hikes, so monetary aspects, and role and career path, they've sort of completely overshadowed the overall poll, right? So as we can see, these two aspects seem to be at the top of those discussions, the high potential discussions, right? And that brings me to my third question, and I'm going to put it to Pradnya right now. Pradnya, when we're trying to empower top talent and promoting the hypoculture, that we're talking about today, is there a need for internal mobility, or is a vertical progression must? I mean, a lot of people at some point might say, I've been working in marketing for so long, I might want to sort of look at something in product. Is that avenue open? Like the person may not be saying that I want to do that, but he might say, is that avenue open? Is that something I can do at a later point? What do you think this aspect plays a role in? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a fair question, and I may be biased, but what I've seen in the India market, there are two things we love. One is the external title, and it's so close to our heart that no matter what role we are actually playing on the ground, we have to have a fancy title because we associate that with our status and reputation. And we look at development as only vertical development. Most people, yeah. And I think the importance of retaining high potential really can't be overstated. They are more likely to kind of leave than the non-hypos, if you will. They're more likely to look for other jobs. And today's market is just making it so much easier. The access to professional network, that's making it so much easier for these hypos to find other opportunities and just being found. So pretty much all companies are kind of in dire need of future leaders, if you will, and the whole competition for top talent is intensifying. And so talent assessment is crucial, but talent engagement, I think, is far more. And one of the ways you can really engage the talent is rotate the jobs. I personally have, and I heard Ekta say earlier, is who is raising their hand. The one thing I've done in my entire career is keep my hand raised all the time, no matter what the role is. And every 18 months, I have changed roles. And I've done things where I knew zilch. So it added a lot of stress to me and my family because I carried the stress home, of course. But at the end of that, I felt absolutely wonderful. And I think if you look at any of those research work as well, you'll realize that there are a few common reasons why people or high potentials, especially why they leave. And while compensation, grade and stuff is of course important, it's also the scope of the role. And I think if we can change the scope of the role minutely as well, that'll give them new challenges, new stakeholders to deal with. It'll expand their horizon, help them understand the organization far better. And as I was mentioning earlier, that you may be hiring a person, an employee for your role, but it is an asset of the organization. And the best way for the organization to also know where to invest and what's the potential of this employee is to see them in different scopes and domains and different roles for the organization to know, okay, is this really my high potential and where should I be investing in this person? So I think internal mobility kind of propels that high performance culture far, far more. And these conscious job rotations helps not just the employees, but the organizations as well get that wider exposure. So vertical progression is not the only way to develop, I would say, from personal experience as well. And so organizations should be looking for internal mobility laterally as much as vertically.
Right. So I think, again, I think fair points where we've sort of spoken about the fact that, where we are and how the internal mobility could actually be a very good tool to use in these discussions, right?
Yeah, and if I'm sorry, if you may allow me just one more aspect, and not internal mobility is good for an individual as well, I felt. And my trigger for me was, without boasting, when I got a sense that I may be the smartest kid on the block right now, that was my trigger to change the role. You want to be around a team where there are smarter people than you, and there are things that you don't know. So you can be very vulnerable, and that will help you stay grounded. And that'll help you bring out so many other aspects of you. It'll help with self-discovery as well. So I personally feel very passionate about the need to keep changing roles within the same organization, not necessarily outside, but keep changing the scope of the role and keep rotating the jobs.
Fantastic. I think so. That sums it up perfectly, and I don't need to talk about this answer anymore. So what I will do is I'm actually gonna, before I move on to my next question, I'm actually just gonna quickly take a look at the two questions that I've already received here. And one of them is, can the same potential and performance be used for cross functional high potential folks? I think this is something that we covered a little bit in our first answer, right? But if Pradnya, if you have the time, please do answer the question in the chat box as well, right? Because I posed the first question to you a little
Sure.
bit, right? Then Sonali Bosli also asked, can succession planning for talent pool be feasible in all organizations? Right. So, I mean, would you like to take this, Ekta, right now?
Sure, I can. I mean, it's the short answer is a yes, it can be. It doesn't really matter, even if there are two roles in an organization, just a CEO and startup person that is joined, let's say an HR professional. Yes, who can take my role? Who can take, can I be the CEO? If I'm the HR, can I become the CEO tomorrow? So succession planning, in my view, can be done for any any type of organization, any volume of organization. It really size, it doesn't matter. What does matter is, how are you, to Pradnya's point, how are you willing to compromise on the vulnerability aspect? It is really important. And I want to share a story with you all. When I remember when I was in my high school, my sisters, I have two older sisters, I'm the youngest of three. They were really good in education. They would be class toppers. I wasn't necessarily the topper. That doesn't mean I was dumb. I was in the top 5. Let's just put it that way. Some of you will say, okay, so you were the 5th rank holder. Well, there were times when I was 3rd also, all right? So depends. But the point what I'm trying to do, say to you is, I was very good in extracurricular activities, be it, elocution, debates, basketball. I mean, you name it, and I would be out there. And finally, at the annual day celebration, coincidentally, that year was the silver jubilee of that school, I got the maximum number of, medals, certificates, etc. And I went home like a proud female, like nobody could beat me, nowhere near, kind of, full tushan and everything. And what does my mother say? She takes me, and it is summer, naturally, school ending time, right? She takes me to the backyard and she shows me the mango tree, which obviously is filled with mangoes, right? And she says, so beta, where is the tree going? It should be flying, right? Because it's got so many mangoes. You have so many medals equals to so many mangoes. And it was the eureka moment, not even a 15-year-old at that point in time. And that stayed with me, exactly to what Pradnya mentioned. The minute I get comfortable, I start getting worried that I'm not learning. I start palpitating almost and stressing, saying, listen, this is not right. I have to learn something new and I want to move. So I think coming to succession planning, marrying it to potential is the biggest aspect that you have to look at. Who will take my job? I have seen many people, I myself have written in some of my succession planning, not HR people coming and taking jobs, but maybe somebody from operations, somebody from the delivery organization coming and taking my job. That's a possibility. So just be open to that is what I would say.
Great. I think fair enough. I think everyone's got to have that eureka moment before they sort of implement these things within their own life as well. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in, and what I will do is I'll actually go back to my own questions, because some of them are actually matched as well. So my next question is actually,
and I'm attempting to answer them. Would you like me to continue doing that, Prashant?
No, so don't worry. Don't answer all of them. I just told you to answer the first one, but don't worry. We'll try to take all the questions live as well eventually, right?
No, he's playing the friend card with you. Be careful.
Right. So I'm going to come to the next question, because this question is something that came to me constantly. What should be non-monetary methods of retaining hypos, right? So how do you ensure high potential folks aren't necessarily and because a lot of times money will be a restriction for a lot of organizations. They won't be able to match the offer, as simple as that. And I'm seeing a lot of questions here which are also connected to the same aspect, right? So I mean, and I'm gonna put the question to both of you. First, I'll ask Pradnya about it.
Yeah, so just saying non-monetary methods to retain, right? And I also, again, given a little bit of experience in this space, I feel that the monetary rewards matter to certain roles and maybe a little more from an early career perspective. What I have noticed generally is once you are at a slightly senior roles, the monetary aspect doesn't motivate you as much. It's the other aspects that you start looking for. And so it is important, but I think the other aspects, the top attributes that attract the hypos, besides the compensation packages, I think what kind of quality of work and challenges am I getting in this role? The work-life integration, I think, has grown manifold with this whole pandemic. The degree of respect I may get as an employee in the organization. What are my learning opportunities? And so there are really so many other ways to engage your high potentials, enable more independent decision making, just empowering them, allowing them to make decisions, allowing them to even fail, experiment, fail fast, innovate, letting them, provide input to a decision, have a seat at the table, if you will, just delegate. These tiny things allows for so much growth opportunities and development. And these are far more important to the high potentials. And you will start noticing that retention may not be as much a challenge. Just inviting them to lead some meaningful and maybe impactful projects, strategic projects across the organization are a few things that I have seen work well. And if I put myself in that, in those shoes of an employee, I think these things will make me very happy. And I'll feel like I'm trusted to take up some responsibility. And then I will be far more engaged in that role. What do you think, Ekta?
You're absolutely right. I mean, happy that you and I are saying that we agree with you, but I think we are basically saying what's tried, tested, and works. Definitely, in my view, those things too, and a couple more that have, that I've seen work very well. Number one is probably giving them a cross-functional project. So not just limiting them to a project which is in their vertical or their business unit, but cutting across, a countrywide or a global project, something of that kind, either to lead or be participant of, number one. Number two, shadow programs. So shadowing a senior leader in the organization, even a CXO, inviting them to some strategic meetings, even if it could be probably a board call, a monthly business review perhaps, but inviting them to those kind of event, I would say, also adds a lot of value for a high potential. And that can be a great way to engage. The last thing which we kind of sometimes say and take it for granted is the mentoring and coaching. Mentoring has become very, what should I say, it's diluted in today's world. The word is diluted. Therefore, many of us are shying away. But if you actually have someone, you take them under your wing and say, hey, I'm going to develop more high potentials. Like me, I'll clone myself. Then yes, that also kind of, becomes very good. Therefore, what I mean is give the high potentials a target to develop some more like them. That also can be a very big motivator for high potentials.
Great. So I think you spoke about cross-functional projects, shadowing someone, having the opportunity to have a seat at the table for important discussions, and mentoring. I mean, so those are 4 or 5 key aspects that actually aren't even based on any monetary aspects. Those are things that are also very easy to do in smaller organizations. So I think that's something that we can all definitely take. So I think some great best practices there. And so the next question that I'm going to ask is actually very closely aligned with a lot of questions and comments that are coming in the chat. And it's about parity, right? How do we sort of manage that? And I have 2 questions. One I'll pose to Ekta, one I'll pose to Pradnya. First, I'll go to Pradnya. How do you differentiate high potential employees within your rewards programs? Or do you? right? So it can go both ways. Should you even start, should you have a separate plan of action for folks identified as high performance folks, or should you not, for the sake of parity?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question as well. And there have been lots of debates around this and a lot of research. I was reading through EY and Deloitte's reports and HBR latest article on that. And there are leaders who are questioning that just for that 5-7% of your top potential, should the organization really be investing so much time and energy in looking at how do you engage them, how do you reward them, how do you invest in them and stuff like that? I belong to the category where I think you should. And like most organizations, we as well do purposefully identify and develop these high potentials, especially when resources are constrained. Companies do disproportionately pay attention on developing certain section of the people because you think they will lead the organization into the future. And whatever that you're doing today is to sustain and stay relevant in the future. So a few ways to differentiate talent through that reward philosophy, of course, is one is understand what trigger the high potentials are looking for. Basically, rewards need to be meaningful to your high potentials. And here you must invest as a strategy in assessing what drives them. And as we just spoke earlier, for some people, compensation is probably top priority. For some, it's not. It's the opportunities I'm going to get, the learning I'm going to get, the challenges I'm going to get. So I think there are enough tools in the market available today that help you kind of track where would this employee lead in the future. What are the behaviors that you're seeing? What are the derailers and enablers? Say Hogan and Clifton Strengths, and so many assessments and tools are available. So organizations should invest in that just to understand the person I'm investing in today, where he or she is leading towards, and is that aligned to where my organization strategy really is. So one is just what is meaningful reward for them. And then define a criteria, say some percentage of your recognition system, right? Your organization revenue, your profit percentage, performance percentage, I don't know, talent rating percentage, engagement percentage. There are so many metrics that are available to you, and it could be a function of all of these to then identify that here's how I'm going to disproportionately give attention to my certain section, 5%, 7% of top talent. But more generally, organizations can create specialized, say, leadership tracks, these learning opportunities that I keep talking about, and the cognitive assessments. Really, there's even a sentiment analysis tool that I was looking at the other day, and I found that really interesting. It can really as close to analyze how your high potentials truly feel about their roles. And that gives you an engagement matrix, truly an engagement matrix, not a result of the survey that they did. I think these kind of metrics will help you a little more in knowing how do I motivate my talent, and what I'm doing, is it worthwhile investing my time and energy of the organization in this top 5%. And of course, as Ekta said, your mentoring, coaching, some of these opportunities also, I think, help in the reward program.
So you are pro having a separate aspect for
differentiating them,
folks, right? Correct. Ekta, my question to you actually sort of is a slightly deeper dive into the same point. It's bound to disrupt the parity within a team as well, right? I mean, eventually, if everyone's working in a team, certain folks expect that if two people are working on the same thing, they should be on the same salary, and that's fair enough as well from their point of view, right? But how do you sort of have that communication? And I'm going to add a certain question to it. How do you ensure that the other person doesn't feel demotivated about the fact that, this person is sort of considered a hypo and the other person isn't?
Okay, that's an interesting question. We are making an assumption, being India and Indians, that the conversation with an individual is no longer confidential, the way you asked me, right? Therefore, bhaichara, I have told everybody what I make. I have told everybody I am high potential. Forget the performance, right? Of course, you share the salary and the potential and the performance, then we are best buddies. So I think, in my view, how do you have that conversation that one person is motivated, one is not? I think is it's more in India, to be very honest with you. I've worked in US and globally. For example, here, when you hire someone from a tier 1 engineering college, everybody is an engineer, let's say, right? An organization is hiring engineers. They can go to a local college and hire at X, but they can go to a tier 1 and they can hire at Y plus, 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 right? And it is absolutely acceptable as a fact. Vis-a-vis, if you go globally, probably the entry compensation, irrespective, unless you are in Harvard or MIT, will most likely be the same. And it is after the output. Output is what value are you adding, what, to the top line or to the bottom line. What's the measurement that you are able to provide to the organization? The output primarily is where the conversation is. And that's where the difference most likely has to happen. And surprisingly, Prashant, I have in my career faced in India the conversation of, hey, Ekta, you've mentioned X to be high potential. What about me? Now, the conversation is reactive in such a case. If it is reactive, then it's very easy to tackle, right? In my mind, the way you do it is, hey, if you are a high potential, you wouldn't be sitting with me and having this conversation. I would be sitting down with you and having a completely different conversation, right? Number one. Number two, many of the high potentials, I've seen one of my, in one of my previous organizations, a really senior leader came to me one time and said, Ekta, I evaluate my worth in the marketplace every 3 years. That's not because I'm disengaged in this organization. I love this organization. I've been here for, decades. But I also want to know, am I still current and relevant in the marketplace? That's very critical and very important. To your point, I think when we are aware of that, not because I've got a great offer, so I should jump, but because an organization worth, like we talked about in the starting of the conversation, is beyond an individual. Now, individual's worth is what I believe, which each one of us believe. We are, obviously the best thing after sliced bread is us, right? However, I think there are lots of other people that believe the same. So finding your worth becomes more important than anything else. And a reactive conversation is always not worth having. A proactive one is what you should be doing, is at least how I look at it.
Fantastic. And I think eventually if a person is, a high potential person, he might actually take up the challenge and say that, okay, I'll become what you need me to become to be considered in that bracket, right? I mean, that's how they should take it, right?
Absolutely. They'll ask, what is it that I'm not doing? Tell me that. Yeah. What should I fix, Yeah. And that's the conversation easy to have.
Great. I think great. That's also a very practical solution to, a lot of these conversations that happen. Thank you so much for that, Ekta. My next question is actually, with regards to, and this is a bit of a gray area because a lot of people don't talk about this enough. And just by the way, to all the attendees, these questions aren't from me. These questions are from HR professionals who've registered. They're probably you guys who've written down questions, during the registration form, and they've come to me. I'm putting them as is with a little bit of paraphrasing, just to sort of have 3 questions in one, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. My next question to Pradnya is a slightly, it's a very direct question, right? With skyrocketing salaries, is ethics and productivity sort of taking a backseat? I mean, and this is something that I think a lot of people asked me with regards to tech hiring as well, where they said that engineers are effectively, the moment they join, you should already be succession planning because effectively they'll have another offer in a month's time, which would be ready with a massive hike, right? So what's your take on this? Is this something we have to now be comfortable with and go on, or do you draw the line somewhere?
Yeah, it's a very provocative question. I think just like the stock market, the talent market is also going through a bull run currently. Who would have expected such a strong turnaround in literally a span of few months, right? From campus grads being really worried about, companies are not honoring their offers anymore. Just last year, if I recollect, to the massive increase in the campus recruitments that are happening this year. And generally people having 3 to 4 offers and they go around shopping saying, which one should I be choosing? Things appear to be like chalk and cheese, literally in a matter of months. And quite obviously during such times, you will find people who kind of believe in the adage and make hay while the sun shines, right? And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's transparent and ethical. So where things start, I think, unraveling a bit is when people sacrifice their long-term goals at the altar of these short-term gains. I myself, I know in my previous years, just minor salary change, I used to feel really happy in the moment. And literally a matter of months, I would even forget what is that exact amount I am drawing every month, because it doesn't matter to you after a while. It matters to you at that moment on the paper when you see the increase. Then everything else that matters is, am I really engaged in this job? What am I really getting out of this place? And I've really seen people choosing offers from fairly unknown companies also, just with a few years of legacy, hardly any brand recognition over those which are such well-established firms. They can offer you so much more, I would say, stability, greater internal mobility. We spoke about that, just an opportunity to shape your whole career. And I think more so with this whole startup ecosystem flourishing in India over the last few years, and so many unicorns around, I think the war chest for talent hiring, it's opened up. It's opened up big time. And there's nothing wrong with going with the highest bidder. It just seems like Rolling Stones gather no moss. That adage is being forgotten. So in the recent years, I feel like the Indian IT market, it has started maturing a little bit, and I see a greater focus in longer term career. I may be biased. This is what I am noticing, that there's greater stickiness to the organizations, but we see organizations investing heavily in their employee value proposition. And I know at my current organization as well, we've spent so many hours thinking through what is it that will stick with the employees, what will make them feel, have a sense of belonging, feel like I'm here and I'm worth being here. And especially in the last 18 months or so that I've seen the pandemic bringing about all these best from many employers, they don't care about margins or bottom lines. They just offer the best care to their employees. And we've seen this in the last 18 months, how much organizations have done to keep their employees happy, to just turn around their processes overnight just because they knew that employees can't come to work. These things matter. They're important for this whole symbiotic relationship to sustain. On the productivity front, though, I have slightly different opinion. I think despite the talent for war, the productivity hasn't dipped. Instead, I think it has grown, and I speak from my personal experience as well. So the real winners in this talent war are those who are masters of their own craft. So you decide individually what matters most to you, and are you getting it out of this? So I haven't seen impact on productivity. I haven't seen people compromising on ethics to a large extent, but then there is some percentage of population where this behavior is rampant. So I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for, but I'm kind of mixed there at the moment.
No, got it. It's you clearly know where to draw the line when it comes to these things for your own things, right? So I think eventually that's the message to the audience as well, right? You do have to know where to draw the line, right? Ekta, what do you have to add on this, the ethics productivity conundrum?
Totally. I think a broken engagement is better than divorce, is how I would put it. So there will always be a few people in our organizations that won't necessarily be with us. I mean, the values are different. No big deal. I mean, our values and their values did not match. And yes, in India, I literally want to say shopping for jobs is something that's become a very common thing, right? They hold the organization to ransom with that one offer letter that they will come, or two offer letters, and you're supposed to match up or whatever. It's the organization's call whether they want to encourage and entertain such a behavior or whether they do not want to. It's completely our call. And it's not, I agree with Pradnya that it's not that big a number. To be very honest with you, I don't think this is a perception matter. We hear two stories and we make that a reality. Yes, there are people like that, but that population and that percentage is very small. Number one. Number two, if there is a person who is potential, we're talking, right, and smart and intelligent, then those people I don't think are going to go for that small money that somebody would be offering, or a smaller increment. They would look hopefully for the long-term results. What is it? Where do they grow? Even in a smaller organization, smaller brand, but maybe I have a bigger role that I can play. Maybe I can grow faster in a smaller organization vis-a-vis a bigger organization, or vice versa. It depends. So I think people are becoming very smart. At least that's what I'm observing in the new generation. They are investing in themselves. They are investing in having those conversations with some seniors. There are very few who are doing what you are mentioning, the unethical part. Very few, at least in my experience.
I think so. I think clearly to the person that asked the question, don't base a few incidents, and don't try to generalize. Try to keep an open mind about it, right? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to both panelists, and I'll start with Pradnya again. Pradnya, what's your favorite best practice? If I could ask you one favorite best practice for retaining your top talent, what would that be? Any phase of your career, anything you've heard about, anything that you would recommend to anyone for retaining top talent?
Yeah. No, I'm a strong proponent of investing in the immediate line manager. I still emulate the behaviors of the first line manager I had. He has had, such an impact on me that without realizing, I have started, behaving as that, because your first manager is someone you look up to, and that's the first experience. So it's really special. So if organized, and I believe it strongly that you join an organization for a manager or for the manager, and you leave the organization because of that manager. And so if we can get that right, if you can invest in that population and have them create a better experience with their employees, half your problems will get solved. So I'm a huge proponent of investing in the immediate line manager. And I've seen results as well.
Great. So investing in the immediate line manager, and again, so to everyone, that's still here, at the webinar, we're at the end of the hour, and this is another pointer where you can actually try to execute this within your own space. This isn't something that's dependent on a big budget or something like that. Investing in the line manager can mean anything. Because that's something that, whether it's a training, whether it's a sensitivity training, whether it's any of those things, right? So thank you so much for that, Pradnya. Ekta, what's your all-time favorite best practice that you think works best for retaining top talent?
For me, I think I would say managing by being a coach. What I mean by that is people come to you as a supervisor, as a leader with problems. I prefer for them to come to me with options, if not solutions as well. Each one of us knows the problem we are facing and what best we can do to resolve it. Now, many a times what happens is they come to you and expect you to resolve it for them. I always say, come to me with an option. Tell me what will work. Tell me A and B, and I will then say whether A and B, one of them is right, or whether I should give you a solution. So making them think is very critical, number one. Number two, I think making them believe that each individual has the answer to the question they are asking is very important for me. That, I think, is the best practice if I had to share.
Fantastic. I think, again, I think what we've spoken about today has a lot of resonance with the fact that we understand that monetary challenges will come up where, sometimes you won't be able to afford the resource anymore, and that will happen. But whether it's coaching, whether it's, like Ekta had shared earlier also, the shadow manager and all of those aspects, a robust learning and development setup. I think all of these things are very, very key to it. So you can all continue to look at all of those things, right? The other thing that, I think we've picked up a lot of the questions that are there. And how can the trend of shopping for job, holding offer and backing out at the last moment, how to handle such a situation? All right. So I think that's a question that I think even if 10 years down the line we're doing this webinar, we'll still be answering that question, right? That how do we ensure that ratio is sort of improved, where someone who's at the very last stage joins? I mean, that's something that I think a lot of recruitment folks do struggle with. Ekta, would you like to share anything on that? Because that's the only question that's sort of left. I think we've been able to answer all of the others, and Pradnya has also tried to answer a lot of them, right?
So I think in my view, Prashant, that's the question. You're right. We will keep answering unless as a country, as a culture, we decide to change. And I'm going to share a small story with you also. It actually drives the point home of what I'm trying to tell you. You know, when I was studying in school, now I'm suddenly feeling I'm very old, but I'm not. I'm super young, Gen Z, in fact. All right. So when I went to US back in '97, um, in my B school, one of the days we were talking about some conversation of what did we study in high school. And back then we used to have a subject called moral science, you know, in which we used to tell, literally, we were taught, do not, you know, speak lies, do not steal, right? These were values that we were being taught in school. I think ethics should become a value that we as a country, I will say as a country mostly, we need to develop. I have not seen this. I've worked in global organizations, worked globally, US, UK. I haven't seen there, if somebody accepts, then 9.9 out of 10 times they will show up for the job. Vis-a-vis here, probably it's 7 out of 10, or maybe even 6 out of 10, it depends. But the answer to that is not a short one. The answer is not an immediate one. I think it's a country and a culture shift and change. Ethics is something that needs to be inculcated in us. You know, once you accept it is our ethics, somebody may offer us a bigger role, bigger money. But if you have said yes, do you go to that individual? Do you take that organization forward or not? So I don't have a solution, in other words, which is very rare. I think as a country, we just need to teach ourselves better.
Fantastic. And I think that sort of helps me sort of sum this up really well. Thank you so much to both the panelists. Thank you so much to all close to 200 of you that attended this. I think it's been a wonderful, wonderful hour. And, you know, I really can't be grateful enough. It sort of brings us to the end of this wonderful hour, which was so engaging from the point of view of best practices, polls, questions, and I mean, all your questions, I think we've been able to answer most of them, and it's because of your questions that these platforms exist, right? So, you know, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much to everyone for being on time. To all those signing out, please do fill out the feedback form. Remember, if you do not give us the feedback, absolute raw feedback, you hated the moderator, you can tell us completely, right? And I mean, please share your honest feedback. We'll be back next month again with another one. But before that, you know, to the panelists, thank you so much. It was so much fun, not just the conversations, the stories, the best practices, and both of you are very dear friends of mine as well. So I'm extremely happy to have you guys here, right? And as the feedback
Well
comes,
corrected,
like,
Prashant.
yes, absolutely.
Dodged the bullet there.
Yeah. No, I want to just take a moment and thank you, Prashant. I think
Yes.
those were tough questions.
Yes, the
we
question
feel
was
like
tough, but
we
again,
had to prepare ourselves. We should have prepared ourselves better. But
No.
you did a
But-
fantastic job.
thank you, and thank you to all the audience as well.
Yeah, thanks
Indeed.
to everybody. Prashant,
All
you did
right.
a good job.
Thank you so much, Ekta,
Thank you.
and let's stay in touch, right? Now that's the end. Thank you so much, everyone. Please stay safe. Please take all precautions, because it might seem okay right now, but we've still got to drink water, wear our mask, and do all the right things, right? So all the best, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.